Hey listeners, thanks for dropping in. I'm Christy.
And I'm Melissa, and this is Buried Motives, where we dig deep into the details of some of the most gruesome
dirtbag murderers. Hey listeners.
Welcome back to Buried Motives.
Thanks for joining us today.
We are excited that you are here.
We always are.
Yes. We just really appreciate you spending time with us.
And I have noticed a bit of an increase in our social media comments, so thank you for joining us over there too.
We really do love interacting with you. And we love telling you about dirtbags.
And I'm going to love letting Melissa tell us about this one.
That's because she gets to sit back and just listen.
It's true.
She didn't have to do the research.
Yep.
But I have to tell you that I didn't even know where to start with today's case. It was so all over the place.
This is another one Melissa has told me she has spent a long time researching and doing notes.
Well, that's because often when we present a case, it's all put together in a fairly logical order, hopefully, so that you can follow along with all the details that we've dug up pretty easily. But when we research a case, it isn't always so nicely put together.
No.
Yeah. And it definitely doesn't come all wrapped up in a logical bow for the investigators when a case is dropped into their laps either. And that certainly was the case with the one I'm going to tell you about today. After months of research, I'm still not sure I understand exactly what went down or can confidently separate the truth from the lies.
Really?
Yes.
Okay, this will be a one, listeners, for you to weigh in on your opinions.
Oh, I would love it. We need to have a discussion about what you actually think went down. Because sometimes no matter how much police work goes into it or how much the prosecutors dig things apart, the full truth is never really revealed. The timelines and the evidence that are collected can't tell the whole story. Only those that were present can actually say what really happened. And when the only person left is an emotionless, calculating, pathological liar, wrapping everything up in a neat logical bow is very difficult.
Ooh, we have sure had our share of big fat liars lately.
It's true. We have been covering a lot of pathological liars. But the dirtbag I've got for you today will rival any of the ones we've talked about before.
Really?
Yes. This dirtbag lied so much that it was actually her defense's argument that she lied so much to get her off of the murder charges she faced.
What?
Yes, that she had lied so much and told so many different versions. How could you possibly know which one is true? Her lawyer argued that since none of the circumstantial evidence or physical evidence could say conclusively what had happened, there was no way to prove anything beyond a reasonable doubt.
Wow.
That was actually the argument that they used.
That is bold.
Yeah. I honestly didn't know how to approach this case so that it would make the most sense. So I decided, just so you can appreciate the full scope of this dirtbag's narcissistic lies and actions, I'm going to start where one of the detectives that was investigating the case started. At the end, but what really feels like smack dab in the middle of everything. Wading through all the lies already told, the lies currently being spewed, and the ones inevitably yet to come when you are working with a lying dirtbag.
I'm super intrigued.
This case was so hard for me to figure out.
Do I need a paper and pencil to keep track?
Of the lies, you might.
Ugh.
But the storyline is pretty easy to follow along with.
Okay.
On February 22nd, 2016, Walter Ammerman III called in a tip to the FBI hotline. One of his good friends had just died suddenly, and he had some suspicions that it may not have been the accidental overdose that his friend's wife was claiming. That was because Walt knew his friend Jason Cochran and his wife Kelly Cochran. He had been playing online games with Jason almost every day for quite some time. He had even visited their home, and they had even been to his. He knew that they didn't have the most loving relationship. The past year seemed like it had been a difficult one. He felt Jason had become more withdrawn and moody throughout the year. He knew Jason was being treated for depression and had previously tried to commit suicide in his past.
Oh.
Walt had felt, though, that not all of Jason's moods were because of his mental health struggles. He had noticed over the past year or more, Kelly was exerting more and more control over Jason. Walt's biggest complaint was that Jason wasn't able to play online games as much anymore, especially when Kelly was around.
Okay.
Yeah, I did get a little chuckle out of that because I honestly don't think that's super suspicious. What wife actually wants their grown husbands to play online games for hours and hours on end, ignoring household chores and work?
And your wife.
That's right.
It's all about balance.
Right. But for Walt, it was just a piece to a much bigger puzzle. Walt knew that both Jason and Kelly used drugs, but he wasn't aware that Jason was using any hard drugs, and especially not heroin,
Ooh.
which Kelly had said he had overdosed on. In Walt's experience, Jason only used marijuana. It was Kelly that used the harder drugs. So it didn't really make sense to him that Jason would have died from a heroin overdose like Kelly was saying. She posted on Facebook the same day Jason died, the news of his death, and it had been a shock to Walt. But it wasn't just that nagging suspicion that had him calling the FBI hotline. It was also the fact that he knew both Jason and Kelly were being investigated for murder charges outside of the state of Indiana.
What?
Yes. In Michigan, they were murder suspects in the disappearance of a man named Chris Regan.
Hey, I didn't see that coming. This is quite the volatile couple.
It is. And could you imagine this all just being dumped on your lap? And be like, okay, I gotta figure all this out.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Mm-hmm. Alerted by the FBI hotline, Detective Jeremy Ogden started looking into Jason's death and the events surrounding it. I have to make a comment about this detective because I'm really not sure how I feel about him. He's one of those man's man, and I know the whole story, and I gotta tell you a good story, and he almost looks like he searches after the limelight.
Oh, so maybe his ego gets in the way.
It doesn't, but it does. He just sets off odd vibes to me. He does a whole bunch of stuff that's kind of out of the norm for what a normal investigator would do. But he does get results. But definitely he likes to tell a story, and it's obvious he likes the challenge of solving a puzzle and being able to talk about that.
So maybe a little cocky about it?
Yes, he's good at what he does, and he is pretty creative when it comes to his tactics. But he does come across as a guy that likes the limelight and likes to tell a good story.
Hey.
Ogden learned Kelly had called 911 the morning of February 20th to say that her husband was not breathing. When paramedics arrived at their residence in Hobart, Indiana, Kelly was distraught and, quote, disruptive, according to the paramedics on scene. She had to be removed because she kept getting in the way of the paramedics who were trying to revive Jason. Ogden attended Jason's autopsy because of the suspicious circumstances and found out that while Jason had a significant amount of heroin in his system, that he also had signs of asphyxiation from strangulation.
Ooh.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know any drug that does that.
No. Jason's death was officially ruled a homicide. And the number one suspect became his loving wife, Kelly, the only other person present in their home, according to her story, at the time of Jason's death. While Kelly played the grieving widow to family and friends at Jason's funeral and on Facebook, Detective Ogden started learning everything he could about the Cochrans. And this was a very deep rabbit hole, and a murderous one.
Yeah, I would say.
Jason and Kelly had grown up in Maryville, Indiana, next door to one another. Jason was 4 years Kelly's senior, and born on August 4th, 1978, to his parents Chester and Mary. He was one of 3 children. He had a brother and a sister. Kelly Marie Cochran was born on June 5th, 1982, to Tim and Melanie Gaboyan, and she was the oldest of 4 children. Both of their families were reported to be very loving and supportive, and they even had occasional neighborly barbecues and get-togethers at each other's houses. Both Kelly and Jason attended Maryville High School, and it sounded like during their high school years, Kelly was a little bit on the wild side, and Jason not so much. He honestly sounded like a little bit of a loner in high school. But that was just the impression I got. It wasn't really reported by anyone, just the vibes he put off. Kelly was described as a daddy's girl, and would later say that she did not like how her mother was, quote, weak when she was growing up, because she let people walk all over her. She never stood up to anyone. Kelly said her mother let people take advantage of her, and that she didn't want to be anything like her.
Ouch.
Yeah, I didn't read any reports of her mother being abused or being this kind of really passive person. Melanie worked in customer service, and it seemed like she was just a person that genuinely liked to make people feel happy and comfortable.
Which is actually a good quality to have.
Right, but Kelly viewed her mother's kindness and generosity as weakness.
Okay, that's a red flag, I think.
Yes. As a teenager, Kelly was a handful for her parents. She got into trouble at school and got involved in drugs and alcohol, which led to her mom kicking her out of the house at 18 because she was a bad influence on her other siblings. Kelly said getting kicked out wasn't that big of a deal because she was always running away anyway.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm.
So she is a bit of a spirited young girl.
Yeah, and she just didn't really care.
Okay.
When Kelly's grandmother died, she was allowed to return home, and that's when she and Jason started hanging out more after she had finished high school. The relationship started gradually, more like just friends hanging out with nothing better to do, and then gradually it turned into something romantic. By 2001, they were spending a lot of time together, mostly at Jason's house. Kelly's mom was a little shocked by this new couple because she couldn't quite picture them together. Many people would say that the two were very different. Jason was quiet and preferred being alone to socializing. Kelly seemed to be the exact opposite and liked to be the center of attention and loved talking with everybody and anyone.
So it would totally be the case of opposites attract.
Right. When the two got together, though, the families embraced the union, even though they found it a little odd. There were things that they did have in common, and they seemed to just make things work. They both liked the outdoors, and they were both very smart. Kelly was known for being able to twist an argument, and people would comment about Jason's introverted nature that there was a lot more going on behind his large frame glasses than people realized.
Still waters run deep.
Yes. Jason had taken courses at Purdue University and had gone back to school and was actually studying business at that same university at the time of his death. It sounded like he was just a really hard guy for people to read. It was known that when he was 19, that Jason had started to struggle with his mental health. He went in and out of depressive states, and at one time he was diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder, but this diagnosis would later be called into question. Overall, though, people thought they were an odd couple, but they seemed to genuinely love each other. Kelly seemed to handle Jason's mood swings well, and she went on to study at Purdue University herself, getting a bachelor degree in liberal arts, majoring in psychology and sociology, and minoring in forensics.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she is incredibly smart. On September 19th, 2002, the couple were married. Kelly said the first part of their marriage was great. They did everything together. They were soulmates. Quote, "We finished each other's sentences. We did everything together." They began running a pool maintenance business together. Jason mainly focused on the pool business, and Kelly worked at various jobs, including a domestic violence shelter on and off in 2002 and then again in 2008. Within 5 years, though, things had started to turn sour in their relationship. Kelly would say the change started to happen only 8 months into the marriage. Kelly would describe herself as stubborn, strong, independent, and feisty. But she claimed that she wasn't so sure Jason liked these attributes of her.
Okay.
Jason's mood swings were getting noticed more and more by others around them. They began fighting more and more, and eventually separated for a short time in 2007. There were never any claims of physical abuse at that time, but it sounded like it was pretty common of them to be very argumentative with each other. Once they got back together, they continued with their pool business. Jason, up to this point, had always done the more physical part of the job, but his back gave out in 2011. When this happened, Kelly had to take over a lot of the physical labor to keep the business going, and she was quite capable of it. She was super strong. Jason would eventually go on disability for his back troubles with the help of Kelly, nudging him on how to fill out the forms in the right way. There was a lot of discussion around just how much Jason's back injury affected his ability to move around and lift things. It sounded like it might not have been as bad as they made it out to be, but it was beneficial for them to collect a disability check.
Okay, gotcha.
Kelly was known to keep a DSM-4 manual with her and to fake symptoms to get prescription medication. So they may have been pulling a fast one over on the system. It wouldn't have been out of their realm of actions. But from this time on, it does seem that Kelly did become the main breadwinner in the home and took care of the majority of the household repairs and the yard maintenance.
Wow.
Yeah. So she took on all of it. And some people said that that was because they didn't want Jason outside being seen by neighbors, that he could actually do these things. And so she had to do it. And others say, no, he really couldn't do it. There's some speculation going on.
So maybe the truth is somewhere in the middle.
Right.
Or maybe she liked that he could do the dishes and she could go cut the grass.
And get all the attention for doing it.
Right.
Yeah. In the beginning of 2014, the couple made the decision to move away from home and get their own house at 66 Lawrence Street in Caspian, Michigan, about 5 minutes outside of Iron River. Iron River was about 6 hours away from where they had grown up.
Okay. So they moved quite far.
They did, far enough.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Caspian was an old mining town about 140 miles north of Green Bay, near the Wisconsin border. It's a small rural town with just over 900 residents. The couple said that they chose to move to Michigan and the remote town because it was legal to grow marijuana and they could use it for medicinal purposes.
For his bad back.
That's right. It was the drug of choice for Jason, and he found it the most helpful for his back pain. They also had a lot of debts in Indiana at the time, so I think it made it a little bit easier to skip town as well.
Oh, they skipped out on their debts.
Yeah. In Caspian, their problems, though, continue. Jason was not working, which contributed to his depression. Kelly described him as, quote, slipping a lot more once they moved to Michigan. Jason at this time was also no longer able to perform sexually. And I'm not sure if this was a psychological thing, or if it was about the pain, or if it was about the meds he was taking for his mental health problems. I think it was probably a combination of all of these things. But Kelly would later claim that Jason could only perform while inflicting pain.
Ooh.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, is like marijuana is a downer. Is it a downer down there too?
Not as much as antipsychotic medication would be.
Okay. And maybe he was even feeling emasculated a bit because his wife was taking care of everything.
I do think it was a combination of a lot of different things. Because Kelly at this time was working all the time, trying to support the two of them and their 2 dogs, sometimes with 3 jobs. And she was still using a lot of drugs recreationally. Prescription meds were the easiest for her to get her hands on, but if she had a choice, she said ecstasy was what she craved. She said that she would do heroin about twice a year and denied being addicted to anything because she could function with her drug use.
But we do know that there are highly functioning addicts.
And this seems exactly what she was.
Well, and you know what's interesting about that too is if he was feeling emasculated, then it would make sense that he would be able to get it up when he's inflicting pain on her, showing some form of dominance.
Right.
I think that could have a lot to do with it.
Yep. What I also think had a lot to do with it is that Kelly was having a lot of affairs with multiple people at this time.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
When you don't feel desired.
Mm-hmm.
This is a train wreck right from the start.
It is.
They shouldn't have moved to Michigan. They should have just moved apart.
Mm-hmm. They should have stayed separated. Kelly said that she saw some people as just casual hookups, and some of them she saw a little more continuously.
So she was just totally okay with this, that, I can go and sleep with whoever I want.
Oh, absolutely.
And so she was doing it right in front of Jason's face?
Yes, he was well aware.
But it was not an open relationship.
That depends on who you ask.
Okay, I'll let you tell me more.
Just wait. It's going to get really spicy. So one of these more consistent people that Kelly was seeing was Chris Regan, a 53-year-old military veteran living in Iron River, Michigan. Originally, he was from downstate Michigan, and he had served in the U.S. Air Force before settling in the Upper Peninsula. Chris was described as a disciplined yet adventurous spirit. He had built a life of hard work and perseverance, earning a reputation as a reliable, kind-hearted man. He raced mountain bikes, sailed, loved the outdoors, and was described as being a neat and tidy guy. He was divorced with 2 sons, and he had moved to Iron River to be closer with a girlfriend named Terry O'Donnell. The relationship between him and Terry had cooled considerably since he had moved there, because Chris was still seeing a few other women.
They're a match made in heaven.
That's right. Chris was pretty active on dating sites, but at the same time, he was single. Terry and him weren't an exclusive item.
Okay.
But he was seeing a little bit too many women for Terry to be comfortable with, so they had kind of taken a breather from each other.
Well, yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
I mean, each to your own, but...
Right. He was sowing some wild oats, I guess.
That's one way to put it.
Yeah. Kelly and Chris met at the factory Lakeshore Systems in Iron City, where Kelly worked on the assembly line, and Chris was, I believe, a supervisor. He was in a higher position than her. They started seeing each other around the end of July in 2014. Chris had wanted to keep the fling a secret. But the rumor mill is often more productive than the assembly line at factories.
True.
Yes. People at the factory soon guessed that the two were hooking up, despite the 20-year age gap. It was a little bit of a surprise to some because Kelly wasn't exactly Chris's type. Kelly was described as being, quote, rough around the edges, with numerous butterfly tattoos up and down both arms and a gruff appearance. Chris was more refined. He was management type material. He didn't usually go for women like Kelly. He liked them a little bit classier. So most people considered Kelly a step down for him.
Ooh. And it's so funny because he's being described as this type A personality, so neat and tidy, but he's acting a little messy.
Yeah, well, that's why I think he's having a little bit of maybe a midlife crisis at this point.
True. That can happen in your 50s.
Right. He's just having a little bit of fun. But usually Kelly wasn't the type of person that he had fun with.
Yeah, but when you're 50 and you're looking for a 30-year-old, that might be the type of person that you're going to be attracted to because it adds to that excitement.
Right. And it wasn't actually a big surprise that people found out about this because Kelly wasn't overly secretive about her extracurricular activities. She would usually park right outside of Chris's apartment several times a week when she visited him for dinner and dessert.
For a booty call.
Yes. Their meetups became pretty frequent, sometimes 5 times a week.
Woo!
It appeared, though, that the two were just out for a good time. Kelly was still seeing other men, and it sounded like Chris might have been seeing other women as well, or at least entertaining the idea through dating apps.
Plus, let's not forget Kelly's married. She has a husband at home.
Yeah. Chris isn't married right now. Kelly still is.
Which makes her the biggest dirtbag.
Mm-hmm.
He's actually not doing anything wrong.
No.
Other than knowingly sleeping with a married woman, I guess.
Right. But Chris had also started to rekindle things with Terry in August. They were taking things slow, though, at Terry's insistence. And it didn't seem that they were getting overly serious because Chris was actually planning on moving away. But they were chatting more, and Chris would take her out to nice restaurants, and he would really enjoy staying home and preparing fancy dinners for her. Terry said that Chris was a nice guy to date because when he was with you, he was with you. And he made you feel like you were the only other person in the room, that you were special, and that he could look at you and just melt you. He was a romantic that would often send sweet texts professing his love to Terry. But he never did this to Kelly.
Which speaks volumes, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Kelly was for a good time, not a long time.
That's right. Terry would be the first person to notice that Chris was missing. After not hearing from him for almost 2 weeks, she became alarmed. And I thought, how long could you actually go missing for before somebody would notice?
2 weeks seems like a long time.
Doesn't it? I thought so.
Well, even his job would notice after the first day, no?
Well, he had some time off because he was in the process of moving and getting ready for his new job.
Oh.
And eventually when he doesn't show up for work, they just think he's taken off to his new job. And so they fire him and then nobody looks for him.
They're ticked off.
Yeah. They think he's just kind of left them in a lurch and gone on to the next best thing.
Yay.
Yes.
That was unfortunate timing.
Or convenient for somebody.
Well, yeah. For Kelly, I'm assuming.
For someone. But Terry also knew that Chris was moving on. He had been eagerly preparing to relocate to Asheville, North Carolina. He was moving there with his son and had found a new job. They had been talking about the move recently and all the things that Chris was doing to prepare for it. He even had a bet going with his son about who would be the first to arrive at their new home, and a steak dinner was riding on the wager. So it was possible, Terry thought, that Chris had left early, but that still didn't explain why he had suddenly stopped responding to her. So it wasn't that he had left, it was more that he wasn't talking to her anymore.
Right.
After doing some calling around, Terry found out from a coworker that Chris's beloved car was parked at the Park and Ride in Bates Township about 10 minutes east of Iron River. She went out to investigate and was even more disturbed by what she found. Chris's knee brace was in the car, and he had just recently had knee surgery.
Ooh.
And there were also 2 bottles of water, which he always kept with him all the time. He would never go out without these things.
Right.
She tried going to his house. His truck was parked there, but the spare key for the apartment was not in its usual spot. It took her a few days to figure out a way to get into his apartment. On October 27th, when she was finally let in, she became even more concerned about Chris because the apartment was in disarray, beyond what it would look like for a man packing. She said that Chris was a very organized and orderly guy, and it sounded like there was stuff everywhere.
Strewn about.
Yes. Terry went straight to the Iron River Police Department to file a missing persons report. Police started an investigation right away, checking out Chris's apartment and his car. At first, they weren't overly concerned, figuring that he had just skipped town early, or they even threw around the idea that Chris might have possibly committed suicide.
Oh.
Yeah, I thought that was weird that hit their radar, but neither of these scenarios really didn't line up with anything.
No.
There were several indications that Chris was looking forward to his new life in North Carolina. All of his texts with his son indicated that. And he had arranged to get a letter from his doctor to say that he was taking Percocets for his knee surgery to explain that if it showed up on a pre-employment drug test.
Okay.
So why would you go to the trouble of doing all of that?
Well, you wouldn't.
Exactly.
And there was no note left behind, nothing.
No.
And all of his items were still at the apartment, so he hadn't moved early.
No, he hadn't left. When they checked out his new place, he hadn't shown up for his pre-drug screening on October 15th, and he hadn't showed up at his new job. But there were things that indicated that he had planned to do that. He had set up a dating profile in North Carolina.
Before he even got there.
Before he even got there, yes.
He wanted to make sure the goods were ready and hot.
Yes. Like I said, I think he was having a good time in his life.
Yep. And he was being honest about this good time in his life.
Absolutely.
That's the big difference.
Mm-hmm. In Chris's gray two-door 2013 Hyundai Genesis, they found a yellow Post-it note with directions written on it. These directions led straight to Kelly and Jason's house.
Ooh.
Yeah. The police chief at the time, Laura Frizzo, recognized the directions when she was told about them. That's because she had been contacted by the factory's HR department on the 29th of September to do a welfare check on an employee, Kelly, who had disclosed that her husband, Jason, had recently tried to commit suicide and threatened to hurt the both of them. She had showed up at work with marks in the past that would be consistent with domestic violence. So when Kelly hadn't shown up for work for a few days, HR contacted the police to do a welfare check.
Good for them.
Mm-hmm. I thought that was very responsible.
Mm-hmm.
Police had driven out to the home and found no one there. A note was left, and Kelly eventually called back to say that she was fine. There's a whole rabbit hole with this incident that the HR department found out about. This incident with Jason was around September 16th, when he was hospitalized for what seems to be a psychotic break. Kelly's parents had been visiting Kelly and Jason on their anniversary, and the visit didn't go well. Tensions between the couple were very high and noticeable when her parents arrived. They said that they witnessed a lot of arguing, but no physical altercations. At the end of the weekend, they had actually suggested that Kelly move back home with them. It was clear to them that Jason wasn't coping well. Kelly said that after her parents' visit, she discussed getting a divorce, which set Jason off even more. He was having auditory and visual hallucinations of people that he had known in the past telling him to harm himself. Kelly would later claim that Jason had also threatened her at this time, but in all the medical reports and all the testimonies from his psychologist, only mentioned thoughts of self-harm. Kelly would tell authorities, though, that Jason had become increasingly paranoid about her activities and that he had started to track her, putting a GPS on her truck. He had even started to call her out on her affairs, following her to Chris's apartment once and texting her to come home and begging her not to go to those apartments anymore through texts.
Really sad.
Mm-hmm. Jason was seen in the emergency on the 16th and then was sent to an inpatient program in a hospital in Wisconsin.
Okay, that's what I was wondering. Are they going to actually get him some help?
Yeah, he was sent away to St. Mary Wisconsin Behavioral Center on the 19th, and he stayed there till the 21st. So not very long, but he was hospitalized.
Okay.
In the hospital, he had his medications adjusted and regulated, and then was released with community follow-up planned. While Jason was in the hospital in 2014, Kelly carried on like she had always done. She was seeing other men during that time and was working pretty consistently. She said that to keep up with her lifestyle, she just did more drugs to cope with everything that was going on.
It just sounds like a hot mess.
It's an absolute dumpster fire.
Yeah.
Kelly later admits that she had actually told the factory or her job about this incident, because she wanted to use it as an excuse of why she couldn't be at work. But in all actuality, she had left to go out of state to do pool closures, which she could make more money at.
Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm.
She's quite the woman.
Yeah. She also had used an excuse about a shoulder injury and said, oh, I can't come into work today. I've hurt my shoulder. And that was found out to be false. And she actually ends up getting fired over it. It was around the end of September, beginning of October, that she was fired from her job. When Jason returned home, he was pretty lethargic, according to Kelly, from his medications that they had adjusted. So this is why Police Chief Frizzo knows all about the directions to the house. That's why she recognizes it, because she was asked to go there and check on this person.
Right.
And so when the detective who's investigating the car tells her about, oh yeah, we found these directions, this is what they say, she's like, wait a minute. I just heard these directions. I know them.
How wild would that be?
Yeah.
Because you would not be expecting these two things to be related.
No, not at all.
But Chris had never been to their house before? Like, he needed directions?
Yeah, because they had always met up at his house because Jason is home.
Right. So maybe that was from when Jason was at the hospital?
There's another reason for it.
Okay.
Yeah, and we're going to get into it. It's just part of the many avenues of this case. So along with these directions that led to Jason and Kelly's house, police learned about the rumors at the factory and that Chris was not happy about people knowing about the affair between him and Kelly. Though he was fine to play with her, he just didn't want everybody to know he was playing with her.
Because it didn't look so professional.
Exactly. That was his argument. And he was upset with Kelly that she was not keeping it secret.
Well, then don't do it, honey.
I know. It's so
I want to bang the employees, but I don't want anyone to know that I'm banging the employees.
Right. And because she wasn't a classy type of person.
But that's who you're attracted to. And she's still a person.
That's right.
Like, he's acting all high and mighty, but he's not behaving that way.
No, he was out for a good time.
Yeah, you're out there seeing how many different women.
Yeah.
It already doesn't look good, babes.
No. But he was straightening it out with Terry.
Poor Terry.
It is sad. But he does sound like he was a very nice man.
Yeah, he sounds great.
Yeah.
He sounds like he was quite the ladies' man.
When you had his attention, Christy, he sounded like he gave you his full attention.
Yeah, I'd like to see a picture of him, actually. Was he attractive?
I mean, he was ex-military. He kept himself fit.
And he obviously had some swagger.
Yes, he definitely had some swagger. All of this, of course, leads police to go and question Kelly and Jason.
Yeah.
Logical next step. When they first arrived at their house to question them, Jason said that Kelly wasn't home, only to have her come to the door almost at the exact same moment.
Oh,
Yeah.
no.
To police, Jason seemed really closed off and really uncooperative with all of their questions. Kelly, on the other hand, though, came across as completely calm and relaxed and was willing to answer any of their questions pretty openly. She admitted to the affair and said that Jason knew about it and was okay with it, that really they were pretty much separated and that she was a single woman.
What?
Yeah, she said she assumed Chris hadn't been in contact with her because he had decided to move early to North Carolina. And she even hinted that Chris had probably skipped town early because he was having financial problems. When police told her about finding Chris's car, Kelly acted like she didn't know the place that it had been found in and denied ever being there. But one thing stood out to police. Kelly made the comment that Chris, quote, loved that car.
Hey.
So she's talking about him in past tense. Yeah. Jason and Kelly's reactions made police suspicious. So they were brought in for further questioning. And this would only raise more questions. During Kelly's second interview, she continued with her story that Jason knew all about her affair with Chris and that he was fine with it. That Chris wasn't the only guy she was seeing. There was a third man, Eric Erickson. And all three men knew about each other. And yes, his name is actually Eric Erickson.
I love that when that happens.
I love it.
John Johnson,
Yeah.
Eric Erickson, Tom Tomerlin.
He's actually a real guy. She's telling the truth about this guy.
Okay. It almost would seem like that, like to come up with a name on the fly. Eric Erickson.
Yes. But he actually exists.
What an icon.
Uh-huh. Kelly explained that Jason was okay with it because he was no longer able to perform sexually for her and was okay with her getting her itch scratched somewhere else.
Sorry, Kelly's saying that.
That's what Kelly's saying.
Yeah, because we know Jason doesn't feel that way.
Well, the police don't know that at this point.
Right.
Police were suspicious of some of the tiny indiscrepancies, though, between what Kelly had told them at the house and now in this second interview. They wasn't really big things, but enough to kind of pique their spidey senses. She had mentioned at first that Chris had one kayak, and now she's saying he has two, that she had never been in his truck, and then she had been in his truck. And there were some facts about how she and Chris spent their time and when they had last spoken to each other. So there's tiny indiscrepancies. They're like, but you said this last time.
Things that you wouldn't need to be lying about.
Right. Just little tiny things that didn't make any sense to lie about. In this interview, Kelly is offered to take a polygraph test, and she says no. Jason was questioned separately and told a very different story than Kelly.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah. He started crying almost immediately.
Oh.
He confirmed he did know about the other men, but he said he wasn't happy about it. He explained that there was a time that he had gotten sick in Indiana, a period of about 18 months, when he couldn't even walk because of his back pain. He told police he believed that Kelly stayed with him just out of pity. He told police that he knew he wasn't, quote, man enough to be with Kelly. So that's why he told Kelly it was okay to be with other men.
Oh, so he's admitting he told her he was okay with it.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think he didn't just leave?
He absolutely loves Kelly.
Okay.
He admits to police that he knew where Chris lived and that he had seen Kelly's truck there when he had been out walking Monday. He even acknowledges that all of this information makes him look like a suspect as a jealous husband. Police ask him to take a polygraph test too, but he declined.
Okay.
Over the following weeks, authorities noted discrepancies in their timelines that Kelly and Jason had given them, and in their stories. Jason in particular seems really reluctant to speak without Kelly present, which further raised suspicions for them. Chief Rizzo was persistent in questioning Kelly, and this led to even more evasive answers, prompting authorities to dig deeper. They learned from Chris's cell phone provider, Verizon, that Chris's cell phone was never active after October 14th. Kelly had sent Chris numerous random texts after that point, but they were all unanswered. They learned that Chris's cell phone showed him arriving at the Cochrans' home on October 14th at 5:25. Video surveillance at a gas station between the park and ride and the Cochran residence showed Chris fueling up around 4 p.m. on October 14th.
Establishing a timeline.
Yeah. Police met with Eric Erickson. He said that when he found out Kelly was seeing Chris, he told Kelly he wasn't interested in her anymore.
But did he know she was married?
He did know that she was married, but Kelly was telling these men that Jason was abusive, that he wasn't interested anymore.
They're separating.
And that they were separated. Eric told police that he and Kelly would often meet at the Bates Park and Ride where Chris's car was found.
Oh.
It was the place that he and Kelly often hooked up at.
Which catches Kelly in a lie.
Right. She had originally told police she had never been there. She didn't even know what they were talking about. Eric agreed to take a polygraph test and was cooperative, showing police his text messages with Kelly, and he was excluded as a suspect.
Yeah, he had nothing to hide.
No. As investigators continued pressing the Cochrans, they obtained a search warrant for their home in Caspian, Michigan. On March 5th, 2015, law enforcement executed the warrant, hoping to find evidence linking them to Chris's disappearance. The search uncovered hints of disturbing evidence, including possible blood traces and signs of cleanup efforts, but nothing would prove to be a smoking gun. What they found was that it appeared that there was blood spatter on the ceiling of their kitchen, but it had been painted over, and so they were unable to test or know for sure what was under there.
Right. Well, and it's been months and months now.
Mm-hmm. When they got the warrant, the couch was positioned at a very strange angle when they went into the home. And when they moved it, there was bleach stains on the carpet.
Okay.
But again, they couldn't test for anything.
Wouldn't you replace the carpet and scrape the ceiling?
They didn't scrape the ceiling. They just painted over it.
Maybe we've just been doing this too long. But I'm thinking I would scrape that paint off and then redo it so there would be no trace.
Mm-hmm.
Not that we're given tips and tricks, but they have had months to get rid of all of this evidence.
They have.
Thankfully, not well.
Well, they did it well enough that there isn't anything that they're able to pull from it.
Nothing concrete.
No.
Because even a bleach stain, I knocked over the bleach. Do they have a body?
No, he's just a missing person at this point.
Which makes this so much harder.
Right. The police's running theory at this time was that Chris was hit with something like a baseball bat close to the front door, and then he was shot as he tried to get away. So they could actually see the blood splatter on the ceiling, but they couldn't tell you that it was blood splatter. And it's in a kitchen, so it could be anything that splattered up on the ceiling. But the way that it projected out on the ceiling, they figured that he had been hit by the front door and shot as he was running away.
So ambushed.
Mm-hmm. There were 2 guns found in the house, but there was also ammunition for a .38 caliber gun, and a matching gun was never found for that ammunition. Interestingly, and I want you to hold this in your brain for a little bit later.
Pin it.
This would be the same type of ammunition. It was an off-brand, kind of unusual ammunition that was used in an unsolved homicide in Hobart, Indiana, 2 months before the Cochrans had left for Michigan.
What?
Yes.
Are these serial killers?
Pin it.
I have pinned it.
A witness from that crime had described seeing what they thought was a white SUV leaving the scene, and the Cochrans drove a white Ford extended cab pickup.
Oh my Lanta.
Okay, so pin that.
I'm not going to forget it. It's pinned.
There were just so many avenues to go down with this case that I need to stay on at least a little bit of a straight line.
Okay.
We'll come back to that.
Perfect.
The next morning after the search warrant, March 6, 2015, Kelly and Jason Cochran fled the state.
Oh.
Leaving behind their home and most of their belongings, which just further raised suspicions against them.
Yes.
Their sudden disappearance sparked widespread rumors, particularly among their neighbors in Michigan.
Yes. This would be some hot gossip.
Yes. But neighbors started coming forward and telling the craziest stories. The neighbors who the Cochrans had stayed with during the search warrant said that they had heard gunshots and screams.
But hadn't called police.
But hadn't. The neighbor's son said that he had heard construction sounds, saws and hammers at night coming from their house. When asked, Jason and Kelly had told them that they were remodeling during the middle of the night when they both weren't working at this time. Their dogs, neighbors pointed out, had gained a suspicious amount of weight after Thanksgiving.
No, Melissa.
These are just crazy rumors from the neighbors. One neighbor reported smelling an awful smell mid-October coming from the Cochrans' burn barrel. It was so bad that they actually went over and requested that they put the fire out. And then neighbors told of Jason and Kelly hosting a barbecue.
No, get out.
For the neighborhood with a considerable amount of meat and hamburgers that tasted off and were very pale in color.
Melissa, no.
Never proven. But this was all just what people were speculating after these 2 fled town.
Okay, is this just like the rumor mill, everyone like making up stuff? Or if that is true, my goodness.
Gross, right?
Yes.
At this point, it's just the rumor mill.
Could you imagine if that was true and you had eaten there?
So disgusting, right?
Would you not go vegan after that?
Oh, you totally would. Yes, absolutely.
I hope that didn't actually happen.
There's no conclusive evidence either way.
Hey.
Kelly and Jason returned to Hobart, Indiana, to move back in with Kelly's parents, complaining that Michigan police were harassing them. Prior to moving to Michigan, Jason and Kelly's family had always gotten along very well with Jason. But when they returned to Michigan, and they were staying with her family from March to November of 2015, everyone would say that Jason was different when he came back. Prior to moving to Michigan, Jason and Kelly's brother Colton had worked together creating innovations for green initiatives while they were both in college in April of 2013. But now those relationships were very different. Tom, Kelly's dad, said Jason acted off and made him nervous to be around, despite Jason and Kelly appearing to get along better than ever before.
Yeah, if he just helped her kill somebody, I'd be acting off too.
Yeah. All of this weird behavior came to a head when Kelly's mom found Kelly and Jason in bed with another woman in their house.
I didn't see that one coming.
No, that was like the final straw for her parents, though. She's like, you have to leave now. You guys can't be doing that in our house. The couple left and they went to Jason's parents' house. Kelly would later explain the other woman by saying that she was for Jason because she had cheated on him. But the woman, Jessica, would say that it was Kelly who showed more interest and that they'd only actually been with Jason once.
Oh, but multiple times together alone.
Mm-hmm. So all of this time that friends and family are worrying about Jason's declining mental health and surprised by the introduction of women into Kelly's affair rotation, police in Michigan are continuing to investigate them.
For Chris's disappearance.
That's right.
I wonder how much Jason's mental health status would have improved if him and Kelly had just divorced and never talked again.
It does make me curious about that.
Yeah, because the more out of control she gets, it seems the worse he does mentally.
Mm-hmm. But also at the same time, he gets worse off when she threatens to leave him as well.
True.
So there's a dependency there.
And maybe she's getting more wild the worse he gets.
Right.
Needing that outlet.
Maybe.
It's a chicken and egg scenario, maybe.
Or the argument could also be made that the less control he has over her, the worse he gets.
True. But has he ever had control over her?
I don't know. Some would say he did.
Okay.
Namely Kelly.
Right.
A second search warrant for their Caspian home was executed on March 27, 2015. So this is after they had fled. This warrant reveals a book that Jason had written called, quote, Where Monsters Hide. The main character was named Quack Quack, Jason's video game handle. The book was about a couple who hunted and collected victims from circuses. And in the end of the book, the wife is the, quote, hero. In the yard of the house, there was a burn spot that looked like it had been where an old burn barrel had been. And in the remaining ashes, police found a Sawzall blade and metal parts of a pair of jeans. All the rivets and zippers and things.
Ooh.
Yeah. Cadaver dogs were called in and led police to the Caspian Pit, a water hole close to their house. Divers were called in and a metal barrel was recovered. It had been held down with a clothesline and cinder blocks. Neighbors would say that the Cochrans' clothesline had recently disappeared and there were matching cinder blocks in their yard.
Okay, so this is probably where they burned the body.
Or burned something. But because of all the damage and the fire, they didn't really recover anything usable from that burn barrel. They just knew that this burn barrel was from their place based on the other things that were found with it.
But nobody usually just throws their barrel in the water.
No, exactly. With the help of Indiana police, Jason and Kelly were called in for questioning again, and DNA samples were collected. So now Michigan and Indiana are working together.
Okay.
Kelly and Jason were again questioned separately. At that time, Police Chief Frizzo questioned Jason first because she felt he would be the one that she could get to start talking about what had happened to Chris. But he wouldn't budge. But she did feel like he was the weak link. Jason at this time was seeing a psychiatrist for manic symptoms that were lasting over a week and racing thoughts. He reported symptoms of depression and anxiety, and he was not sleeping well. He was easily distracted and reported feeling hopeless and worthless. He was isolating himself from family and friends. During this time, he was re-diagnosed with bipolar 1 disorder, a panic disorder, and internal life anxiety disorder.
Ooh.
Mm-hmm. During these interviews with Michigan authorities in Indiana, Kelly's story actually changed slightly. She said she had met up with Chris that last day on October 14th at his house to have sex and cook him lasagna before he left.
So that's different than what she initially said.
Right. Police had very strong suspicions that this was a lie, though, because there was no evidence when they went through Chris's house that there was ever any lasagna dinner served at his house. They're like, no, you haven't made lasagna here. There's nothing in the garbage. There's nothing here.
There was a different treat served that night.
Yes. Despite police's efforts, though, they weren't coming up with enough evidence to actually arrest the Cochrans. There was not a lot of concrete evidence that would ever be uncovered in this case.
That'd be so frustrating as an investigator.
Many police officers would make comments about how clean the car was and how the only evidence they found at the house was a dented door frame and just very, very small traces of blood. Cadaver dogs were brought in, but they couldn't find anything in the house or the car. The investigation came to a standstill. That was until Jason's death was ruled a homicide. Detective Ogden brought Kelly in for questioning in 2016, but he's not upfront with her that Jason's death was ruled a homicide. Instead, he tries to develop a rapport with her and gets her talking about the couple's problems in Michigan. He acts like he understands her frustration with the harassment Kelly feels that they have endured and keeps pointing out that the police were just trying to do their jobs. The detective gives a little, but doesn't let Kelly totally win in presenting her side of the story. He's actually quite good at this. Kelly develops an interest in Ogden, and this cat and mouse game ensues over the next couple of months in meetings and investigations that are happening. Through these meetings, it's very obvious that they're both trying to analyze each other.
Oh.
Remember that Kelly studied psychology and sociology and even took a class in forensics.
True. So it's not that she's interested in him in a romantic way.
No. It sounds like she saw him as a worthy opponent.
Hey, interesting.
Yeah. Kelly is a very convincing liar, and she twists tales like no other. During early interactions on February 28th and March 4th, Kelly tells Ogden that she had nothing to do with Chris's disappearance. She says Jason didn't have anything to do with it either. Pretty much, she just keeps up what she had previously been telling the police chief in Michigan. Kelly proudly describes how she is able to take care of herself and that she has never been afraid of Jason. Ogden tries to plant the seed that she can be a witness versus being a suspect in the case. He outlines because Jason is no longer around, she can come clean with her side of the story. So he's like laying it all out there for just tell me whatever you want to tell me.
Basically, Jason can't defend himself, so you can pin this on him.
Right. Detective Ogden tries to nudge Kelly to tell him more information. He had realized pretty early on that Kelly was very intelligent. She had told him that she had caught the FBI trying to bluff her and Jason previously when Michigan was investigating them. Ogden plays into Kelly's need to be respected, but decides to try and bluff Kelly in different kinds of ways. He arranges a plan with Walt to be carried out on March 12th. Walt calls Kelly up, at Ogden's insistence, and tells Kelly that before Jason died, he mailed Walt a letter that he said not to open unless something happens to me. Walt told Kelly that he opened the letter and that there was another note inside that said send the enclosed letter to the police without reading it.
Ooh, but this is false.
This is false. This is Ogden's trying to capture her.
Right. A little setup.
Yes.
I love it.
Kelly's initial reaction was to cry and ask Walt not to send it or to destroy it. But then, almost like she's figuring things out during this phone call, she flips and tells Walt to do whatever he has to do.
Okay.
It all happens very quickly, but her initial reaction is, don't do that. Kelly called Ogden on March 14th at 8 a.m. She just wanted to let him know about a letter that was going to go to the Iron Mountain Police and said things were about to come out.
Okay.
So it's almost like she's hedging, like, okay, if it is real, I'm going to let him know that the truth is about to be revealed. On March 22nd, though, nothing's happened. Kelly hasn't revealed anything more to Ogden. She's keeping her lips sealed. Ogden recognizes that Kelly's driving past his house suspiciously.
Ooh.
So he follows her as she goes away from his house, and he sees her go to a forested location. And he starts to recognize after this day that she's visiting this location quite frequently. And in the coming days, he keeps watching her and he starts to think that maybe this place has a significance for her. So on March 28th, Ogden decides to try and play another psychological game with her, since Kelly hadn't bitten on the other one completely. He went to a tree stump that Kelly had been walking by during visiting this forested area, and he carved, quote, "Chris is here," on the stump. On a different tree, he carved Chris's last name.
No!
Yes.
What a king. That's amazing.
Isn't that crazy?
I love it.
So, and then he just sits there and watches to see what her reaction's going to be. On March 29th, he went back to this same spot to see if Kelly was going to show up again. He watched her go into the forest and come out of the trail very quickly. He figured his trick had worked and that she had been spooked by his message.
No kidding.
Yeah. He then sat back and waited, but he didn't have to wait too long. Kelly called him that day saying, "We need to talk." And when he kind of put it off, acting like he didn't really need to talk to her right away, she just continually kept texting him.
She was spiraling.
Mm-hmm.
Because she would have thought really that Chris's spirit was going to haunt her.
Yes. He made her sweat it out a bit, but then finally did arrange to meet her at Veterans Park. When he got there, Kelly was actually passed out and he couldn't wake her up.
What?
He actually had to call an ambulance because he was quite concerned that she had taken something. But she eventually came to and said that she hadn't slept in days.
Yeah, right.
I think it's actually possible that she hadn't slept in days because he had baited her with this letter. So she would be up worried about, is this letter real? She kind of called his bluff and was going to wait it out, but I'm sure it was playing on the back of her mind. Like, what if that letter is real?
Yes.
And then she sees this note in the forest of Chris is here.
I would have loved to have been a fly on a tree in that forest to seeing her reaction.
Right.
That would freak you out.
If you had a guilty conscience.
Well, it would freak you out even if you didn't. Even this was just a loved one of yours who had passed away and you go there and you see this on the tree, you might be like, whoa, what's happening?
Right.
But especially if you're a dirtbag.
Mm-hmm. So they do this little meetup at Veterans Park, and after being cleared by an ambulance to say, actually, she's fine, nothing's wrong with her, and Kelly says, yeah, I just haven't slept in days, the two talk for a couple hours. And then as it's getting late, Ogden suggests that they go to a restaurant to talk. But it's actually because he wants to get recording equipment so that he can capture what they're saying.
Yeah.
They did end up at a restaurant around 8 p.m. and they stayed there until the restaurant closed around 9 p.m. Throughout that conversation, Kelly kept falling asleep, and later she said she took a Xanax before going into the restaurant. Later, she would use this as an excuse of why she told him all these things, because she was just so tired and she was out of it. She had taken medication.
So it'd make it inadmissible in court because she wasn't in her right mind.
Right. The chat at the restaurant wasn't actually really revealing at all. But as they were walking out of the restaurant into the parking lot, Kelly told Ogden that Jason shot Chris and he died quickly. It's okay because he died quickly. In the parking lot, she said Chris was supposed to come and eat lasagna and Jason wasn't supposed to be there. He surprised them while they were having sex upstairs in the Cochran's bedroom. Ogden talks her into doing the right thing and going to the police station that very night for questioning. They take the trip from Hobart to Iron River so Kelly can talk to the police there. And during the trip, she slept most of the way for the 6-hour drive.
Well, yeah, she'd taken a Xanax.
Mm-hmm. When she woke just before getting to Iron River on May 30th, she tried to get a promise of immunity out of Ogden for anything that she had told him or was about to tell him. And he said, heck no.
No. Sorry, sweetheart.
Yeah. Luckily, if one thing did come out of the Karla Homolka case, was that I think police are a little bit more leery of making deals before they know what information you have, especially for complete immunity.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. In Iron River, Kelly asked to speak to Police Chief Frizzo, which was actually kind of shocking because up until this point, it was very clear that there were not good feelings between the two of them.
Oh.
But with her trusty detective by her side, Kelly, I guess, felt like she could open up to Frizzo. Kelly agrees to help police find Chris's body. They drive out to a rural trail while Kelly points out various locations where she says they disposed of Chris's body. A place she had previously told Ogden that only she would know how to get to. Then they drove to the Cochran's house in Caspian that they had abandoned after the police had searched their home. She did a full reenactment of sequence of events here. But now she starts to change up her story again. They weren't in the bedroom, she confesses. She said they were having sex by the back door.
Oh.
And that Chris fell into her and they both tumbled down the stairs when he was shot. And that she tried to give him CPR. She said Jason then, quote, downsized Chris with a machete knife and a chisel. And it took him about 90 minutes to do so.
Ooh, downsized? What a terrible phrase.
I know. That was pretty awful.
Yeah.
During this reenactment, there are some times where she looks like she might start to cry, but other times during these interviews, she is completely cold. And matter of fact, as she says, they were downsizing him.
Ooh.
And at other times, she's cracking jokes with the police and eating pizza. The whole thing does not seem to disturb her in any way. It's just like another day. And I honestly don't know how the police kept their own emotions in check as she's telling them these things, and it's just so nonchalant. But obviously they had to go along with her attitude to keep her talking. Kelly points out a pair of forceps that are still actually in the kitchen sink.
Like medical forceps?
Medical forceps.
Okay.
And she says she used these to try and get the bullet out of Chris's head. And she says this as if it's just like a dish that, oh yeah, I used this for Christmas. She just picks them up and she's like, yep, I used these forceps. Jason told me to get the bullet out of his head. The forceps would be one of the only pieces of evidence that would link Chris to the Cochran's house. His DNA would be found on them later. It's my assumption that she thought she had cleaned them well enough and that it was safe to give that detail to the police. But the tiny grooves in forceps would have been really difficult to clean.
And why was it still in the sink?
Well, I think they had actually used them a couple of times.
Ew!
Yeah, but never had fully cleaned them properly.
Oh my goodness.
And that's why I think she was okay with saying, yeah, these are the forceps that I did with this with, thinking that they wouldn't be able to link or find any evidence on them.
Gross.
Makes you want to clean everything twice, hey?
Or not eat at other people's houses.
Yeah. I did find it interesting, though, that Kelly's defense team would later argue that Chris's DNA on these forceps didn't mean that he had been killed at the house.
What?
Yeah, because they were portable. They could have been used anywhere. And you couldn't really prove that they hadn't been used for first aid or something like that. The defense would try to argue that their presence didn't mean, in this instance, that Kelly was telling the truth when she lied so many other times before.
Right, but it proved that his DNA was inside their home.
But it was something that was portable.
But still found in their home.
Mm-hmm.
If you're the defense, that is what you're going to argue.
Right.
I would.
I thought it was interesting. Kelly goes through this reenactment and continues to outline the sequence of events. That Jason made her cook supper for him while he cut Chris up in the basement.
What?
She said while cooking burgers and fries like he requested, she threw up in the pan. So she ended up feeding Jason the lasagna she had made for Chris and lured him to their house with.
Okay, this is all kinds of wrong.
I know. Kelly tells Ogden that she wouldn't let Jason put Chris's head and hands in acid because it was too dangerous for them, and people might notice if they had to purchase that amount of acid that would be needed to do that. She says she refused to carry the multiple bags filled with Chris's body pieces out to the truck, and she chooses the location and offers tips to Jason on how to avoid being caught while they move Chris's car, which she says they took the time to do in the middle of dismembering the body with the Sawzall.
Because they didn't want anyone to notice his car at their residence?
Yeah, I think that's it. It wouldn't have been good to leave the car at their place for too long, or else somebody else could see it. She tells differing accounts of who drove which vehicle to dispose of Chris's car at the park and ride. But she is kind of proud to admit that it was her idea that led to no evidence being left behind in that car.
But it was because of her expertise.
Right. Later, they moved Chris's body out of the house under the cover of darkness. When they got back, she told Ogden that she and Jason had sex.
Yuck. You're a special kind of evil. If you can literally dismember a body after brutally killing them and then get it on.
Well, she says she didn't really help with dismembering the body. That was all Jason. She only tried to fish the bullet out. And then she would hand Jason the cord for the Sawzall.
That's a moot point.
Mm-hmm.
You've literally just killed him and seen his dead body, touched his dead body, know that he's been chopped up, and then moving pieces of his body.
Yeah.
But you know what? That is actually so common with couple killers that they get aroused from it.
Mm-hmm.
Ugh.
While Ogden was taking Kelly back to Indiana on March 30th, he questions her about if there are more victims. She starts to tell him about a Crown Royal bag that contains Jason's trophies from previous victims.
No.
She tells Ogden that she had taken the trophy bag from Jason a couple weeks before and hid it. She said where she hid it was in the woods near where she later chose to dispose of Chris's body.
Where the tree stump is.
No, because that tree stump was back in Indiana, and now they're in Michigan.
Right.
On March 31st, 2016, Kelly arranges to meet Ogden at a different location where she says she had disposed of another person that Jason had killed. She would tell them about a third location as well, but nothing would ever be found at these locations. Police didn't actually spend a lot of time even searching them for anything because they believed that Kelly was just trying to lead them on a wild goose chase and draw attention away from Chris's death. Ogden continued to maintain a relationship and acted like he was believing her story, that Jason had been the only bad guy and that she had just been an accessory. All of these interviews are taking place with Kelly's consent. She was never in custody for any of them. Through all of these interviews, it comes out that on the 15th and 16th, she left her house. And during those times went to Chris's apartment to find her wedding ring that she had taken off and left by the bed the last time that she had been there to have sex with Chris.
Ew.
Yeah. She also says that she took his camera because there were sexual pictures and videos on it and says she later disposed of it in the lake. Video footage would capture her walking across the parking lot close to Chris's apartment with the camera in her hand. But this wasn't to hide sexual pictures from anybody. This was really done so she wouldn't be connected with Chris's disappearance. Every other time, she had parked in front of the apartment. And this time, she was parking in a nearby parking lot. So she didn't want to be seen when she entered his building. Chris's prescription Percocets were also discovered missing from the apartment later, and it's assumed that Kelly took those too. But she would deny it. Not that that denial would mean much.
No.
Each time she and Ogden meet, her story evolves a little more and is never exactly the same. Police believe that they are getting closer to cracking this pathological liar when she checks herself into a psychiatric hospital from April 16th to the 22nd in 2016. And that's when they really start to apply pressure. They push harder, trying to get her to finally tell them the whole truth. On April 26th, Chris' birthday, Ogden asked to meet with Kelly, hoping that she would tell him even more things because she was feeling sentimental. Purposely chose this date.
Yeah, smart.
But Kelly stalled, putting off the meeting. Then she texted Ogden early the next morning. Quote, "Ever been to the West Coast? I was driving all night." Kelly was fleeing, and even though up until this point in her story it had been Jason that killed Chris, a warrant was issued for her arrest, finally.
Yes, thank you.
Questioning her family, and an emergency ping on her phone showed that she had went to her cousin's house in Kentucky. And it also revealed that she might possibly be suicidal. They were able to ping her phone, which was so interesting because even though she had kept it off the majority of the time, she couldn't help but turn it back on for very brief periods to check and see if Ogden had messaged her, and so that she could answer him.
Good.
Yeah, he was baiting her with the messages that he was sending her because he was banking on her not being able to resist answering, or at least seeing had he answered her back.
Great.
Kelly was taken into custody by U.S. Marshals in Kentucky on April 28th, 2016 for the murders of Chris and Jason.
Good.
On April 30th, she reaches out to say that she will only talk about what really happened to Ogden and Frizzo. These two detectives were becoming quite the pair, and it would develop into a relationship and a marriage after the investigation.
Aw.
Yeah.
Those who fight crime together.
Stay together.
That's right.
Yeah. It was a bright spot in the whole investigation, especially since Police Chief Frizzo would actually end up losing her job overseeing this case through to the end.
What?
Yeah.
How dare?
It was really sad. I guess there was, I don't know if it was a mayor or somebody was out to get her fired, and they used her dedication to attending the trial on her own personal time because she was taking time off to attend the trial to fire her.
Dirty. If you're the guy who did that and you're listening, you're a dirty dog.
Yeah. But she did get a husband out of it. And now they're making documentaries together about the case.
Well, I guess it all worked out how it was supposed to. But that was really dirty. To me, that just means she was a really good chief.
Right. She wanted to see it through to the end.
Yes.
Absolutely.
But what a story to tell your friends on how you met.
Yeah.
Well, there was this dirtbag.
It would be a good story to tell. During these interviews, Kelly's story was that when she and Chris were married on their wedding night, they made a pact with each other that if either one of them were to cheat, and if they were caught, they would then have to kill their lover. If they didn't, then their spouse would get to kill them.
My goodness, who does this on their wedding night?
So bizarre. She says on October 13th, Jason had wanted to go to Chris's house and kill him because of the affair. She said that he had also previously talked about killing Eric. She said that it was a stupid idea to kill Chris at his house, so they came up with a plan together to lure Chris to their house.
Oh my goodness.
She tells police that her phone wasn't working, and so she used Jason's phone to set up the meeting with Chris, promising lasagna for dinner and herself for dessert. This was all corroborated through text messages found later. When Chris arrived, she told him to park around back and enter through the back door close to the kitchen. She said she and Jason had already discussed that she was not able to kill Chris herself because she loved him so much. So Jason agreed that he would do it, but he insisted that she had to help. Her job was to push Chris down the stairs where Jason would be ready to shoot and dismember him. When she invited Chris over that night, she knew he was coming there to die.
Oh my goodness. She was basically taking like a lamb to the slaughter.
Mm-hmm. When Chris arrived, she decided to have sex with him because she knew this would, quote, drive Jason to do her bidding for her.
So Jason's down in the basement listening to his wife get it on with Chris right at the door.
Yeah, and she said she purposely did this to drive Jason to do her bidding.
Or that she just wanted to get her rocks off with him one last time.
Maybe.
It's both.
Yeah, it's always both. She said she positioned herself against the wall in the entryway out of the line of fire, and Chris would be directly in it. She would later tell detectives that she was upset with Jason for demanding this of her because the affair with Chris was, quote, the only good thing I had in my life.
Then run off with him.
Mm-hmm.
He was moving. You could have went with him.
I don't think she had that opportunity. She later lies and says that Chris invited her to go with him, but that was a lie. I think she actually wanted to. I have a theory about this case. But Kelly blames her husband, and that's why she said she decided to murder him. She said, quote, it was revenge. I evened the score. She said that she had thought about it for 16 months. About killing Jason. And when the opportunity came up, she reported that Jason looked at her with a mix of confusion and fear as she suffocated him, as he was too incapacitated to fight back from the heroin.
So she drugged him and then killed him.
Mm-hmm. She said she waited for the opportunity for him to ask her for a hit, and she gave him a good one.
What a dirtbag.
Mm-hmm. She said actually that the heroin was taking too long. So that's why she decided to climb on him and suffocate him.
I hope that look that was in his eyes haunts her daily.
I don't think she thinks about it at all.
Uke.
After a brief stay in Kentucky, Kelly was moved to the Iron County Jail in Michigan, and investigators pressed her to show them where Chris's remains and the murder weapon were located. On May 17, 2016, she took police to a particular tree along the Penatoga Trail to recover Chris's remains. They were actually found just off the trail in a field a short distance away from the spot that she had pointed out. The night before she led them there, she had told Frizzo that she had been victimized as a child, making her the way she is. But then she would later tell Frizzo, quote, no one made me. No incident made me the way I am. I was born this way. This is who I am. I don't have feelings. I don't feel sadness. I'm not remorseful.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that put a chill down your spine?
Especially since the very next day she's showing you where she hid a body?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Out on the trail the next day, she showed very little emotion. Police would find Chris's skull, minus the lower jaw, with a bullet hole entering through the back on the left side and exiting through the left cheek, taking pieces of bone with it. It was confirmed through dental records that this actually was Chris's skull. The remains were found among shredded garbage bags with obvious signs of animal activity. Nearby, a .22 caliber bullet and a pair of eyeglasses belonging to Chris were found. But not all of Chris's remains would be found. They just found shredded garbage bags.
That's really sad.
In 2018, when a documentary about Chris's death was being filmed, one of the film crew would actually find the lower segment of his jaw.
No way.
Mm-hmm.
That's wild.
Yeah. During these field trips that Kelly would take from prison, she would lead police out to other areas where evidence had been discarded. Pieces of a gun and a magazine that were also connected to Chris's murder. A few days after Chris's skull was found, she is interviewed by Ogden again. And during this interview, Kelly seemed proud of herself as she says, quote, "I watch and study people, how they act, and how they seem to feel and react to others." When she is questioned if this is what she did so that she could manipulate people, she said, not all the time. And she admits that she has some psychotic tendencies and lacks empathy.
Which would explain why she looked down on her mother for having emotions.
Mm-hmm. During a phone call with Ogden, she says she wants to talk about love because she, quote, didn't know how to feel it. So she studied how people in love responded to each other. She told the detective, "You feel it, and I can't."
But I thought she loved Chris, and that's why she had to murder Jason, was for revenge.
Well, that was the story that she was telling. And this, I think, actually is a story that she's telling at this time as well.
Yeah.
I think she might have been fairly perceptive of how the detectives were interacting with each other. And that's why she starts talking about love.
Yep. Playing on that.
Yeah. It seems that during this time in Kelly's life, she is bent on either unloading everything and coming clean, or she is looking for the most attention she can get and starts making up the most sensational claims. She begins talking more and more about other victims. No specifics, just dropping hints that there may be more. She says this to several people, including her brother Colton and her mom. And I think her poor mom, I feel so much empathy towards her. One of the conversations that they played during the trial was when Melanie was talking with Kelly while they were waiting for her trial, and it was just heartbreaking. Her mom questions her on how she could do the things that she's saying and the things that she's accused of. And Kelly coldly tells her mom that she has had these homicidal thoughts since she was young. Her mom is clearly distraught and says, quote, "I never saw it. I never saw anything." And Kelly can be heard chuckling, saying, "That's funny, you didn't see that."
She's probably just messing with her.
Mm-hmm. But her mom's like, "No, honey, I didn't see it. Why didn't you get help?" And Kelly responds, "There is no help. I already tried it." And then her mom responds, "Evidently, you didn't try hard enough."
Yes.
When her mom asked, quote, "Do you have a conscience?" Kelly responded with, "What do you think?" Her mom's answer was, quote, "I don't think you do."
Yikes.
How heartbreaking as a mom would that be to have that conversation with your child?
Whom you love.
And just recognize how cold and heartless they are.
And just even thinking how much she has fooled them.
Mm-hmm.
Like they were so concerned about her, they wanted her to move back home with them because they thought that Jason was the threat.
Yeah.
Wow.
During her time in jail, Kelly continued her interviews with Ogden as he tried to get the truth out of her. But it was extremely difficult. During his testimony at the trial, it was clear even he had a difficult time keeping all of her different versions of the truth straight. She hinted to him that she had been the mastermind of the plan and the reason why so little evidence had been found. And she kept up with insinuations to police and family and friends that she and Jason were practice killers and that there were other victims. She claimed to have other, quote, friends buried in Indiana, Michigan, Tennessee, and Minnesota.
Oh,
yes. The media, of course, was quick to jump in on this, pointing out that only seasoned killers could have disposed of Chris's body so efficiently, to leave barely any trace behind, and to be so cold and calculated. The headlines labeled her the Devil Woman of Michigan.
yeah.
But there has been no physical evidence ever found of any other crimes or victims.
Yes, but the physical evidence of Chris's death would not have been found without her either.
It's true. But her stories continued to evolve and change over the next 2 years as she waited for her trial. In custody, she made shivs out of the arms of her glasses. Originally, she said it was to gain respect and harm a guard. Later, as she prepared to go to trial, her story became that the shivs were made to harm herself. She said that she had had a rough go and had seen enough of life. The idea of her suicide attempt was supported by the prosecution, who would later use it to say that Kelly was aware of her guilt and knew that her back was up against a wall. But letters called the, quote, goodbye letters she sent to her parents do actually show some guilt. In them, she places the blame on herself solely, saying, quote, in actuality, I was the monster. I crushed Jason with the affairs while knowing I let Chris walk right into his own funeral.
Yeah, she's really contradicting herself, isn't she?
Mm-hmm. These expressions of guilt actually went along perfectly with now her new claims that she was so distraught over being forced by Jason to take part in Chris's death that she had told the detectives that she was the mastermind because she felt so guilty.
Oh, this is just calculated.
Mm-hmm. She said that the murder had always been Jason's idea. She now claimed that she had lied about almost everything, that she had lied when she said that she had lured Chris to the house. She had lied about being the mastermind of the plan, and she had lied about there ever being any other victims. There weren't any. She said that she had previously lied about all these things because she felt so much guilt about Chris's murder that she actually wanted to be viewed as a monster because that's how she felt, because she was so guilty.
That I deserve it.
That's right. She now claimed that she had been so terrified by Jason and his years of abuse that she had no other choice but to go along with his plan to murder Chris, and that she was forced to help dispose of him and clean up the evidence because she feared for her life. That's why now she was pleading not guilty to the charges. She testified at her own trial, like a true narcissist.
Yep.
Her testimony was pretty much, I lied all those other times, but now I'm telling the truth. It was some of the most emotionalist testimony I have ever seen. It was the exact opposite of Stephanie Lazarus. It was so bizarre.
Nobody can compete with Stephanie Lazarus.
No. Well, this person competes on the opposite end of the scale.
Right.
Like there is no facial expression. About the only time she actually shows genuine emotion is when she's asked to defend her choice not to flee and get help, given the numerous opportunities that she had and her obvious knowledge of how to get help from a domestic violence situation.
Mm-hmm.
Because remember, she worked in domestic violence shelters.
Right.
And she left the house after Chris's death multiple times by herself. There were multiple times that she was in the room with other guns and could have taken Jason out then and fled.
Right.
Or called the police or did any number of things. And the only time that she gets a little bit, I'd almost call it indignant. Like, how dare you think that I had another opportunity?
Ow.
Or not believe my story, in other words. The prosecution was still able to poke holes in her case and convince a jury of her guilt. There were text messages between her and Jason that showed that she was the dominant one in the whole relationship. There were messages that he was like, hey, I've made supper for you. Are you coming home tonight? Please don't go to those apartments again.
Oh.
And it was clear that she was the one that had acted more callously after the murder. It appeared that it had actually upset Jason afterwards. He had spiraled out of control.
Right.
But she acted like nothing had ever happened. She even made a booty call with Eric 2 days after.
Are you for real? Well,
Yeah.
Actually, that doesn't surprise me.
That's what she did. And there was this whole story that she had made up about Jason using Chris's severed hand to wave at her, saying this is the last time he'll ever wave at you. But that was revealed to have come from another murder case.
Oh, no.
Yeah, from a classmate, actually, that had murdered somebody and had done that.
Oh, so she was just using somebody else's horrific story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to garner sympathy for herself.
Oh.
After 3 hours of deliberation, the jury found 35-year-old Kelly Marie Cochran guilty on all charges, including first-degree premeditated murder for her involvement in Chris's death. The trial court sentenced her to life imprisonment without parole for first-degree murder, 2.5 to 4 years imprisonment for larceny in the building because she had stolen Chris's camera, 6 to 10 years for imprisonment for conspiracy to mutilate a dead body, 3 to 5 years imprisonment for concealing the death of a person, and 2 to 4 years imprisonment for lying.
For lying? Good.
Yes, I thought that was so perfect. I had to break it up because she actually got more years for lying.
I didn't know you could get jail time for lying.
I guess in Michigan, you can get jail time for lying to a peace officer.
Okay, parents in Michigan, you can teach your children that you can go to jail for lying.
That's right. After being found guilty in Michigan, Kelly made the choice to plea in Jason's murder. In May of 2018, she was sentenced to an additional 65 years in an Indiana prison. As part of the plea, Kelly requested that the state of Indiana not be able to charge her for any additional murders.
So there's definitely more murders out there.
Well, I think that comes back to why they fled Indiana in the first place.
Yes.
And that original murder that was linked to that ammunition they had in their house.
Yes, I still have that white SUV vehicle pinned.
Mm-hmm. Which is interesting. But she didn't ask to not be prosecuted for any murders in any other states where she said there were other bodies.
Oh, she gave the specific state, just this one.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Since being incarcerated in Women's Huron Valley Correctional Facility in Michigan, Kelly has reached out to media and done several interviews to get attention. She now claims that she was a bored wife that was using drugs and started having affairs. This is what led to Chris's death. She now claims that Jason had tied her up while he dismembered Chris, and she maintains her innocence in his death. So she had absolutely no part in it because Jason tied her up, so she couldn't have been accessory.
So she was a victim, actually.
Mm-hmm. Obviously, she's still looking for someone to spar with over her lies.
Oh, everyone needs to stop interviewing her.
Yeah, don't go anywhere near her. Let her just rot. And that is the case of the sick, twisted, manipulative, and evil dirtbag, Kelly Marie Cochran. May her stories finally come to an end, and hopefully one day, somehow, maybe the full truth will actually come out.
Amen. Wow, Melissa. That's a wild one.
Mm-hmm.
And I can see why that would be a hard one to research and figure out where is the truth in all of that.
Well, we actually still don't know the full truth.
The only truth we know for sure is that she was a dirtbag.
You are absolutely right, Christy. She was a dirtbag. And we will be back next week with another dirtbag.
Absolutely. But until then,
see ya.
Bye. Another late night recording.
We had so much to say.
We really did. About a lot of things.
I might get excited during this case.
I might too. I have been known to do that. Okay.
Yeah. So I'm really not sure how I feel about him. Don't use no double negatives.
Yeah, okay.
Kelly became the main breadwinner.
Became the man.
That became the man. Yeah, pretty much.
Add attention?
Yes, add attention.
Okay. Sorry, my mom listens to this. Sorry, Mom.
Okay. But yeah, the women kept coming back. They're sudden disappearance. Word Indiana.
Indiana?
Indiana.
I won't even say that though, but just like, I'd believe it at this point.
Oh, I know.
Actually,
it's so crazy. But
a full reenactment?
Well, maybe not a full reenactment, Christy.
Sorry.
Because
I wouldn't put it past her, to be honest. Do I have a volunteer from the audience?
No.
Okay.
Not a full reenactment. But she does a reenactment.
Okay.
Come on, stomach. Work with me here.
Third member of our podcast. We don't put any of that in there.
Another Sound Off Media Company podcast.